Welcome, everyone. I have my old friends with me today, Leon Sharpe and Synthesist. And I guess we're going to talk about what we're calling incompetency, but not. The idea behind the name is we are watching a lot of comment sections and comments from pundits and people who are saying Joe Biden is incompetent. But I think we are all of the opinion that he's not. Whether or not he is incompetent is irrelevant because everything that is happening thus far is by design. Am I right, boys?
Yes.
Yeah.
So the first aspect of incompetency that raised a red flag, besides the initial process of red flags, I started seeing right-wing pundits talk about the incompetency of Joe Biden's administration during the Afghanistan withdrawal. And my impression was nobody is this incompetent unless they're trying to be. There's no way you are this incompetent unless there's another plan. Like, you don't leave, and I've heard figures all over the place, so I'm just going to say 30 to 80 billion dollars worth of military expenditure in a country unless you did it on purpose, right?
I mean, there can be low-level incompetence, but the people who put people in those different roles, the people who control them aren't incompetent. There's always a plan. Now, plans can fail. They don't always work out properly. But just thinking that, no, it's all incompetence, there's no conspiracy, there's no grander narrative, that's the wrong way to think about things. That leaves you confused. So you're always in a state where it's like, hey, look, just one more push and it'll all collapse. But then 10 years later on, why isn't it collapsing? Why are they getting stronger? Why do they have more power? Oh, it's because they're incompetent. Well, that doesn't work out anymore. It doesn't explain anything anymore. That's a great morale boost. After it doesn't work out that way, then you have to start questioning, okay, what's actually going on? What's the real plan here?
Okay, so my idea is that if 30 to 80 billion dollars worth of contemporary American tech, military tech specifically, gets disseminated from Afghanistan to all lower countries in the world, because they have to raise money because their economy is more or less crashing, which China will come in to do so, but I'm getting distracted. 30 to 80 billion of American military tech is going to go to a lot of different countries. What is that going to require the American military complex to do?
Prominent HJWs and those types into higher positions, right?
No.
No, of course not.
No. Innovate and grow. So I believe they reached such a level that it wasn't possible to procure the funds to get the F-45. Like, they had done the F-35, it was top of the line, development issues, whatever, I know about that. But they needed to disseminate high-tech technology to the world of rogue state, which I think Afghanistan will definitely become. And they need that to be able to procure funds to develop new material, develop new fighters, develop new this and that. They're just saying, hey, man, we had the M1 Abrams. We had 600,000 of them in Afghanistan, and now the M1 Abrams is going everywhere in the world. We need the M5 Abrams. We need this new drone tech. We need a way to attack people. We need the cyber component, the digital attack component. We need all this new military technology. And all these firms are now poised to say, hey, we've been developing this, let us get the government contract.
Yes, that's one key aspect. I think there are a couple different aspects to this too, how the United States has been fighting against these insurgent movements, and they're not high-tech, they're not well-equipped. They don't have these grand professional armies. They're guerrilla forces. But if you can corral them into, tricking them into using these conventional warfare weapons that the United States is good at destroying. I mean, we saw Iraq 1, Desert Storm. We completely destroyed the Iraqi army, and then we went back and did it again. That's one aspect. Another aspect is that it fuels the black market. There's all these weapons that will go out to different various groups that maybe can destabilize certain countries in the Middle East. Maybe it goes to Africa, Europe, maybe in Asia. I mean, the Uyghurs are really close to Afghanistan. They've been trying to rile up the Uyghurs for a long time now. There's a lot of different components to this. And like I said, it fuels a military-industrial complex. It's like, hey, look, there's a grand enemy out there. Maybe we have to go back in again. Maybe we have to be in the area again. Oh, we can give these contracts out to these military companies. Oh, man, look at this and that. There's all these different benefits to it. It's not just look at this giant failure. In the short term, yes, it looks bad. But in the long term, the United States is poised to rev up the war engine again. There's always another enemy out there. There's multiple enemies out there. Maybe some of these people come back to the United States or Europe and cause some chaos. Maybe they cause some chaos in other countries that we don't like. Maybe there's certain governments that we want to overthrow. And what weapons are they going to use? What weapons are they going to use? Definitely. Who's going to train them on these weapons? Who does this all the time? Oh no, CIA does this all the time? Oh no, they don't do that anymore. They can't do that. They're incompetent. They can't do that.
They don't do that anymore. They haven't done that since 2016, man. Come on.
Yeah.
That's in the past.
They're not incompetent in what they're doing. They know exactly what the hell they're doing. The part that is amiss is that we are incompetent. We are not paying attention.
The major frustration I had, Leon, when we started talking about this was the comment sections are bursting with guys who are saying, I can't believe how incompetent this regime is. I can't believe how incompetent Joe Biden is. And I'm saying the regime is not incompetent. Joe Biden is incompetent. Clearly. He barely campaigned. He's clearly incompetent. And everybody who voted for him voted him in knowing that he was incompetent. And there might be, I'm being conservative, as one does, to say that 40% of Biden voters knew that he was incompetent and knew that I'm voting the party in and shadow forces will be in control. I don't care. And they're probably 20% of that faction that believes that, oh yeah, Kamala Harris probably will be in charge. Neither of those people are in charge. The people who have been running the COVID-19 response are the ones who are in charge. The people who are colluding with corporations to roll out a vaccine mandate are the ones who are in charge.
Exactly. This could have been squashed a long time ago, but we don't pay attention. The average person, they're watching people do regular stuff all day long on a cell phone. They're watching people do mundane things. And it's funny that that's the entertainment that we as a society in general is going for, like really extreme dumbed down entertainment. And the things that are going on in plain sight. You know, the average person doesn't even know half the things that get brought to them during election season. When the election time come around, actually why Joe Biden is incompetent. They wouldn't know, besides the headline things that the, whatever Republican runs up against them throw out there, those things, these key points, Afghanistan, Keystone Pipeline. But the fact of the matter is, the average person doesn't even know why the Keystone Pipeline is so significant. Well, it's significant because it was our opportunity in a long time to actually be independent from foreign oil.
Sure.
And why is that significant? Well, because we spent 20 damn years in the war, Well,
and it goes beyond 20 years in a war. It goes on to geopolitical positions, why we wanted to bomb Syria, why we wanted to... I don't even think Iraq was that part of it, but at this point, I don't believe or disbelieve anything.
I mean, look at a map. What country is between Iraq and Afghanistan? Iran.
Yeah.
And Iran has a major role in combating Saudi Arabia due to ethnic and religious differences, Shia versus Sunni, all that stuff. And the Saudis, they're an oil power. Why?
Right.
How do we help the Saudis? Well, if we're independent from the Saudis, we don't need their oil anymore. Do we even need to be there anymore? We don't need to play this great game anymore. But it goes back to show you how all these things are interconnected. And the average person, they like to believe, they have this myth about equality, and whenever they see somebody better than them, you need to take them down a notch. We're a very underdog type of nation. We don't like anything big. We don't like big business. We don't like big government. We like the underdog a lot. So how do you make somebody equal to yourself? You gotta knock them down a notch. And to do that, an easy way to do that is believe that the person above you is stupid. Look at these politicians. They're so dumb. They don't know what they're doing. Oh, I'm so good. See, I don't need this power. I'm an American citizen. I know everything. I see what's going on here. But they don't, because when you're watching TV, you're watching a movie.
It's not real.
It's theater. You're being corralled to vote certain ways. You're being corralled to hate certain people. You're trapped in this basic left versus right dimension. You don't see the grander narrative. You need both the grand narrative and the small details to understand both. It combines everything. You see the bigger picture, and you start to understand the smaller details of how these things play out.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason I think that Joe Biden's being presented as incompetent, and nobody's really fighting it. I mean, the blue checks on Twitter are fighting it, like, oh yeah, finally, adults in the room, but they're absolutely wrong. What they're doing is setting up Joe Biden as an incompetent purveyor, an incompetent actor, so they can replace him with their people. Like, they need a person who's in their stable who can do wrong within their parameters that they can replace. And I don't even think they'll replace him with Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris is, I think, even more controlled than Joe Biden, because Joe Biden is senile. He's on his way out, where Kamala Harris is completely hands-on, but completely controlled by the interests who are going to introduce the New World Order.
I think that's exactly why they'll bring in Kamala, is because she's even more controlled. My kind of conspiracy is that the Obama faction, that previous administration, all those people, they're the ones really directing everything currently. We see this with all of these more progressive politics, all these more progressive policies. And I think that's why they want someone like Kamala in there. Because although she's not popular, she doesn't need to be. She's not this great revolutionary figure. She's not an FDR or an Lincoln, right? These two figures, they're essentially dictators because they had so much power. The executive branch has been so stripped of power where it's hampered by all these different factions and organizations. But once in a while you get a good figure. Obama could have been that figure, but even then he was controlled. We saw that even his own greatness was kind of hampered, and he was kind of propped up as a great figure too. But comparatively to somebody like FDR and Lincoln, he wasn't really all that great. He didn't really have all that much power either. He sort of ran on shutting down Guantanamo, getting us out of the Middle East, but he didn't. In fact, he waved his hand and bombed even more people in the Middle East with these drones. Partly that's because drone technology advanced, right? But it shows to you that even he couldn't get us out of these wars, despite being a supposedly great figure. So it's clear that the executive, whoever's in there, isn't really in charge. They don't really have that much power.
Yeah, they're kind of the CEO, someone to showboat. People need a face. And that's one thing about like hierarchy and order. You know, somebody's got to step up and talk to the people. Somebody's got to step up and play that position of communicating what moves are going to be made or what direction we're going to go in. And, you know, it's great to have a central head figure to either praise or throw the blame at. And the interesting thing about our government, it is so complex. You have what some of us have been taught in school, you know, your three branches and how they keep each other in check. But you got people who are actually in politics and they are elected officials who don't even know what their role and what their position limitations are. And of course, a lot of the issue is graft. You know, everybody's taking a piece of the pie. Everybody has some kind of motivation as to why they went for their position. And Kamala Harris is the perfect example. If you look at her track record when she was a prosecuting attorney, she's the type that'll do anything to get the job done. She's a cutthroat. And like you said, nobody likes her and nobody liked Joe, but Joe is good enough. He was going to carry her over the finish line. And, you know, it really does feel like a countdown and just waiting for this guy to just unplug and check out and they can go ahead and get her in there. But at the end of the day, whoever sits in the seat is still not the point because some of their agendas were still able to be accomplished through having Trump there, you know?
Well, and this goes back to the idea of Build Back Better and how Boris Johnson and, what's his name, that leaf? Son of a bitch.
Justin Trudeau, Mr. 1000 Races.
Some of blackface, man?
Yeah, that dude. In the Anglosphere specifically, Build Back Better has become a thing, which we all know at this point. Anyone who's listening to this knows by now that this is a consolidation of power.
It's sustainability.
This has nothing to do with sustainability. This has everything to do with sustainability as dictated by those who are in charge of what you consume. This is a centralization.
It's sustainability of their power and position. That's all they want to sustain.
is the technocratic thing, and this is where I wish we had Jeff, but we'll go forward on this, but it has nothing to do with sustainability. It has everything to do with accessibility.
You find it interesting that right now, the FDA is making a strong effort to knock off like supplements, like that NAC drug. It was originally categorized as a drug, and then they were able to sell it as a supplement for years. And it turns out like they've been using this stuff for all kinds of things that actually help people. It's been proven to help people in a lot of different areas. It has a lot of antioxidant, things of that nature. And it's just funny how like this is all about our health. Like all of the freedom and all of the things we've complied with, we've given up so much ground to get to the end of this thing. We got to win this battle against COVID.
But we don't have to win the battle against heart disease.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to win the battle against lung cancer. We don't have to win the battle against widespread obesity.
Yeah, that's the point. Like, it's really not about your health.
Hi.
Bucklander is joining us late in the game while we are talking about incompetency, but not the misperception of globalist incompetency in politics, but it's actually right in line with the Great Reset.
So incompetence in...
Just saying that everybody's blaming Donald Trump for inflation and Joe Biden for inflation. But the point is the Fed has been printing money sort of without answering to anybody, but who they really answer to is the IMF and the International Bank of Settlements, which are international bodies.
I certainly think Joe Biden doesn't particularly care about inflation, really. But I also don't think Donald Trump is a sophisticated enough conservative to really care about inflation either.
I agree, too. And at the same time, I don't think we should blame Biden for inflation because most of the money printing that took place happened under Trump. But I also wouldn't blame Trump because,
we got on that train with Obama.
Right. So it's not really anybody's call in that regard. Like what you need to look at is the Fed. So there was a debate that took place between Anomaly and Six Hessenhammer 666, where I was like, who's to blame for money printing? And I think it's a superfluous question because this is part of the plan, is to devalue fiat currency, period, across the globe so you can introduce a digital currency that can't be devalued.
I take a rather sort of harsh view that, like, ultimately we're to blame for most things, as in, like, the public, because we have decided that we like all the things the little benefits that come with inflation. Boomers especially, right? Like, boomers have presided over a generation of inflation, and there have been certain benefits for them to it, and they don't have to pay the price for it. And now we don't like inflation because now it's out of control. Now we're like at this edge of like it being out of control.
When you say we, who do you mean by we?
Yeah, the people.
You and I?
Yeah, everyone. I mean, only the person who really unplugs from the system can really say they're not responsible.
Well, I would say that you and I, being guys in our 30s, building wealth for the first time, building a savings account for the first time, care about it much more than an 18-year-old who got a couple of bumps from the Trump bucks.
I mean, I don't particularly care about it myself.
You're landed, though, you.
No, it's not about that. It's about more concerned with acquiring skills for what's coming than a pot of money that, regardless of inflation, I'm not sure I'm confident in. I think there's other things that like make me less than super excited about money, or like this retirement fund sort of thing, because I'm not particularly interested in the culture that's dependent upon it. I'm more interested in a culture I don't particularly want to live off this fund of money. I want to develop a setup that looks more traditional than, oh, I'm 70. I hope I live to 70. And when I do, time to start living off this check. Part of that is in the build up between now and then, I don't want to live a life that's dependent upon market forces and inputs and outputs. I do want to kind of just go off grid. That's my ideal. And that might not be for everyone. It's not for everyone, but I think that's where
Well,
I'm
I
heading.
think that's where most people are heading. Some are forced into it due to the situation. But one point that you did touch on is whose fault is it? He's not interested in blaming Trump or focusing on Biden. It's just like, well, we were fine with printing that money if it benefited us. Last year, people were fine with getting that $600 or however much dollar check. We were fine with it. But
Yeah.
now we're going to the grocery store and we're seeing there's nobody working.
Yeah, that has a lot to do with people being paid more on unemployment. I don't know if that has to do with money printing. I mean, at some point it does, but people are being paid more to do nothing than they are paid to work.
It's not entirely connected with that. You're seeing the same problem in the UK where there's not enough people working, and the UK didn't get the same sort of just stimulus packages. If you were already working, a system was developed to keep you getting paid if you were put on like 0 hours or something, whether you're full-time or not. But so it's still the same problems there. It might just be not quite so exaggerated, but the same problems there regardless of stimulus or unemployment, etc., because we're seeing it in Europe. Because Europe has taken a more conservative economic approach to the economy with COVID.
I mean, that relates to how, like, all these so-called native people or native citizens, they don't want to work. They're lazy. So bring in the immigrants. They'll work. They'll work for that little pay.
What's really funny about that is now you've been hearing in the UK after Brexit, British people don't want to pick strawberries. For some reason, strawberries are the classic example that they go to. British people don't want to pick strawberries. Now we have a shortage of truck drivers and like petrol's running out in like certain gas stations. And they're saying Europeans don't want to come work in Britain. So it's both. Now we're getting told both British people don't want to pick strawberries, but also Romanians don't want to drive our trucks. So it's a weird situation.
The Romanians will become British one day, really soon. I think it's too harsh to blame the average person for all these problems. Like, of course, if it's true that if everyone stopped feeding the system, then everything will stop. But the average person really doesn't have that much power. It's always up to the elites. They're the ones who have power. Now, in our democracies, there is some sort of compliance, some sort of blame to give on to people, on the voters. But given what we saw in the most recent election, they seem to do what they want to do anyway. Still fudge the numbers a little bit to make the right party win. They'll fortify a democracy, so to speak. See, the elites, they'll do whatever they want at the end of the day. It's the permanent bureaucracy that are unelected. I mean, to be fair, the so-called elected officials are sort of unelected too, but it's the permanent bureaucracy. It's the managers. Nobody elects them. They don't need to go to Congress to pass laws. They pass policies instead. You see, these aren't laws, they're policies, and we have to follow them. If you don't follow the policies, you get fired. If you don't follow the policies, you'll pay a fine. Don't worry, it's not law, they're policies. Like, even though supposedly we're supposed to have a say in the laws that are being passed in our rulers, that's not how things actually work. These unelected officials who are in government, even in the private sphere, for 20, 30 years, they're there. Whoever's in power doesn't matter. Those people will still be there directing the policies, directing how the culture forms, directing what you see on TV, directing the products you buy, directing the different foods you have to eat, directing the vaccines that you have to take. You see, those people, they're the ones in charge.
Yeah, because we allow them to be.
Well, I mean, yeah, to a certain extent we allow them to be, but
I'm kind of ultimately I'm a Democrat in everything, right? In that, like, I think even North Korea is a democracy in that, to some extent, the people in North Korea are not prepared to pay the price. I sort of take this sort of like bottom line view of politics. So there's always a price to be paid in a democracy. In all systems, democracy is paying that price. And so every system is a democracy. It's just a question of whether people want to pay that price or not. But that's more, it doesn't really matter. That's very theoretical.
well, and I would until recently I would say there's a big difference between North Korean democracy and United States democracy. Right? In that, when was the last time you saw a North Korean voting election go so far in one direction.
I mean, it's always true at some point, the person who ruled cannot be fully irresponsible. So I've been reading Sam Francis recently. How he talks about the managerial elites, and in the United States and Western Europe, he calls them soft managerial regimes. So opposed to the hard managerial regimes of Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, how they're more willing to use force. In the soft managerial regime, they use coercion, they use manipulation, they use cultural hegemony as a tool to convince people to behave certain ways. And we saw this described by Jay Dyer regarding Hollywood and CIA and the mainstream media, how all these different outlets that directs your worldview, they direct what you see on the screen and your beliefs and your behaviors, what foods you want to eat, what different products you want to buy, what sexual activities you want to engage in. They sort of direct these things. So in a way, yes, the average person, it is part of their fault. But Cinder said that just recently, the United States has become a lot more like North Korea. But I would say that it's been going on like that for decades. Ever since mass manipulation and mass media has come into being for decades, for over half a century, that's kind of iffy because how much say does somebody really have? Now, I can guess what people are going to say. They're going to say, but still, it's your choice to not watch these things, to unplug. And that's true. But it's a major uphill battle at this point. If you're born into the system, if you're born, let's say you're a Zoomer and you like girls with abs, right? You're just a feminine little boy. That's a major uphill battle. Now you need to recognize the different forces you're fighting against, the different subversive forces that are at play. That's part of your responsibility. But somebody needs to wake them up. Somebody needs to make them aware about these things. And then it's on them to unplug.
There was a big shift in the way men think, a big shift in the way women who want to be married and want to raise children operate. There will always be degenerates in every society and every generation, but it seemed like as a whole there was a push here in America, a common culture, I guess you can say, that men will be strong and we will build families and we will build shit and we will work for a living. We will make things. But, the 1900s roll around, fed, then we go into a couple wars, and now instead of making jeans or fixing your jeans, we're buying jeans because we've turned into a consumer-based economy and a lot of vanity. It wasn't about getting an automobile that's going to be able to get you from A to B and take care of your business. We went from that to wanting to get more, wanting to lease, wanting to get in debt. So I guess you're right that, you can't blame the person now for the mistakes of their father, but at the same time, there's so much available information and history that the average person can go and obtain themselves and kind of get a perspective of like, how did we get from here to there?
If I can put it another way, it's that in the last 100 or 200 years, we've fallen for the lie that they've told us that you can have it all and you can have 5% growth every year. And that was a lie, and we've been lied to. But we also should have known better. We shouldn't have fallen for the lie, because surely we have enough evidence present at hand to know that that's not realistic. But the lie was too appealing.
Yeah, so it goes back to the idea of incompetence or not, because if you're within the system, if you're not looking at things from a different perspective, if you're looking at it from within the system, the approved narratives, then you're thinking, hey, look, everything's working out, and when things don't work out, you blame the politician, you blame the scapegoat that's at the head. It's like, hey, look, this person's stupid, let's vote in somebody else, and then it's the same thing going on, it's the same game still going on. Why is that? It must be because they're incompetent, we'll vote for somebody else. But clearly, that's not working.
Well, yeah, and it doesn't help that we've increased the franchise to include people who are even more incompetent, and that isn't a racial point, that's a sexist point. If you look at all these things and a lot of our complaints, right, they really get going around 1919 when women start getting the vote, and I don't think women being able to vote has really done anything positive. And that's not me being hyperbolic. Like, I literally think for their own sakes too. I think all the things that women care about, I mean, they've been told to care about abortion, but I don't think like actually that really matters. Also, women are not very good voters. Women are single issue voters. They're more likely to vote for a party or a candidate based off of a single issue, whereas men are much better at balancing the issues. So they look at the whole situation before they cast a vote. The idea that like men are in favor of rape culture somehow is demonstrably false, because if it was up to men, right, rapists would be killed. Rapists would be executed.
And women would give it up willingly, whether they like it or not. Am I right? Right, fellas?
There's a friend of ours who, whenever I start talking, not of ours, of mine, and I sort of joke about like these sort of like Conan, like I grab a woman and she's grateful for me saving her from like the Sarlacc pit. It's a joke more than anything else. He's pointed out that all what I describe is, it's called Gorian fantasy. Have you heard of Gorian fantasy?
Yeah. Yes, I've heard of Gorian.
It's nothing to do with gore, dear listener. Yeah, that I'm living in some like sword and sorcery Gorian fantasy with like grateful sex slaves who I've rescued from. And what you just said reminds me of that.
That's the joke of it all, though. Like, because majority of the men have become so bitch-made, women will be in those predicaments because a lot of the men aren't in a position to protect them.
I'm kind of enjoying an opportunity to be chivalrous. What happens when all the defenders are gone, but the predators are still there? The predators never look like what you think they look like. Much more like the beta male clingers. They're not like the Duke lacrosse team, right?
It actually relates to Sam Francis again about different managerial elites, how he distinguishes two types of elites, class 1 and class 2. Class 1 is the more intellectual type who uses persuasion. Class 2 is the more, they're more willing to use force. They're like the warrior types. And what you described there was the class 1. They're foxes, they're not lions. They like to sneak around and use their words to try to get in and control people. And this goes to show that they're very good at it. That's who's ruling in the West right now, the class 1 types. And it goes to show that if you're not aware of their tricks, then you're easily controlled. And that goes back to the point about how we're the incompetent ones. You have to watch out for their tricks because they want to keep you stupid and dumb. They want you to keep you corralled. They want you to be the enemy. They want you to be the Holocaust denier. They want you to be the Nazi because that's easy to fight against. And you can't be incompetent like that. You can't be going around wielding tiki torches and all this stuff because they're good at stamping that out.
I love to walk girls back to their place as a sign of chivalry, but to give them the option of savagery.
And if they show weakness at any point in time,
What you're getting at, Cinder, is, the implication.
Right. Like, look, I'm here for you because weak men will prey upon you, but I'm strong. But also, I'm stronger than you. So if
if you show any weakness, I will put myself upon you.
It's better than an old man sneaking up behind you to sniff your hair. Let's be honest.
who's actually protected by people with guns, and his right has been solidified within the Constitution to sneak up behind you, sniff your hair, and be protected with men with guns.
Oh, by the way, wow, making an industry of taking advantage of children.
Great segue.
It's not just the women, it's also young boys too, and especially it's in this human trafficking sort of global apparatus. It's especially young children who've lost their parents, and they have no IDs, so nobody knows if they disappear. There's no one to protect them. And also, a lot of these people, like Ghislaine Maxwell and Kamala Harris, they're predatory types too, so you gotta watch out for them also. But it's always strong men who put them back in their place where they belong.
I think there should be a disclaimer in saying this stuff, I think, is very, very, very important to know, but you should look into it in the right way. I think, Fatty, you and I had this conversation a few days ago where we both were talking about like watching Mouthy Buddha on this, and it was just like we both binged Mouthy Buddha.
Yeah.
And I had a horrible like week or two after that. But in a way, I think it was kind of good. I'm not saying don't binge Mouthy Buddha. I'm saying just be aware, because in a way, like, it hit me all at once.
It's kind of like you pull on a string, everything unravels, everything starts to make sense, like a new perspective. And it's like, it's hard to not look. You're horrified, but it's hard to not look.
And I think men in our position, in the long run, probably benefit more from a mouthy Buddha binge than a slow osmosis. Because,
we don't have kids.
well, I mean, I warn guys even more like Uncephalized who have kids who have not watched it. Like, I'm just telling you right now, you're going to kill someone tonight. And guys out there who don't have kids, it's going to put a weight on your soul, but you should binge it. Because it is the reality of what's happening.
It's like that scene in True Detective where the two detectives, one of them shows the video of these elites engaging in these various acts, and he's just horrified. He has to take a drink, and the other detective, he's looking away because he's already seen it, and he knows. He's the one who gave him the drink. He's like, I know it's bad, man. So we gotta take to deal with it, but you have to see it.
But this is worse than True Detective because this is real.
It's what it's based off of. It's why they use the same symbols. It's a microcosm of reality. Like, although it's horrifying, you need to see that stuff. You need to know how the world works. You need to know that that thing exists out there, and what's at stake. You need to know what's at stake. The horrifying things that can happen. If you don't know, then you won't take it as seriously. You don't realize what's at stake, basically. Like, some example is the border crisis. People are like, oh, it's these poor people who are in these horrible countries who are coming over so they can be free and safe. But what goes on at the border? Well, the women and children get raped by the coyotes. That's what happens, but they don't tell you that because it's an absolutely good thing that they come here, that they risk their lives. So they have to come here. No, we don't talk about that other stuff. We have to let them in. And it's like, why? Why can't we make it better over there? No, they have to come here. Well, do you know what happens when they come over here? Do you know the process of what happens? Do you know the things they go through? No, we don't talk about that stuff. They have to come here. Look at these racists beating these poor refugees. Look at them. They're whipping them. Look at these horses taking the horse pills. Look at them. They're evil. They're evil racist horses. It's like, do you know what's really going on, or you don't know what's going on because you don't want to watch. You don't want to see what's actually going on. So I'm going to sit in this specially crafted narrative that makes everything feel safe. But that's not reality.
And you would think actually that why aren't they talking about it? Because surely it suits their purposes in that narrative, which is actually, see, this is why we should make immigration easier, because they're getting raped.
I'm entirely for, in the United States position, reforming the immigration process. Because I've known people from the Philippines who are doing the process, and they're like, look, there's no way that I'm going to get in before 7 years. And I'm talking to them on the phone like, that's ridiculous. So that's what I would like to see change. But what I'd also like to know is how people who are dirt poor, who have no opportunities in Haiti, get to Honduras and then get to the U.S. border and then get across. Like, I've backpacked as a late teen, early 20s. Like, traveling takes money.
I think what's insidious, it feels like you're being gaslit, because I can, like, whether or not I think the government is like hyper competent but putting on a show of incompetence, or whether they're trying to be competent when they're actually hyper incompetent, my attitude about that sort of changes from day to day. And that's what I mean. Like, it feels like you're being gaslit. You're never quite sure. Wait, are they competent but playing at incompetence, or are they really just genuinely incompetent? Like, is this not part of? Yeah, as I've been listening to things that we've put out, I realize this is one of my favorite sayings, but it's not a bug; it's a feature. The incompetence is a feature.
Yes, that feeling of being gaslit, of being confused all the time, that's part of it. They do it purposefully, so that you're always on unsure footing, that you're always in limbo, that you're never sure. It's like, oh, just give me a guiding light, give me a reason, give me something to anchor me. But no, they want you confused and all the time. They want you to be unsure all the time. It's part of the process.
And of course, being a Christian, I would say that's why they don't want you to be a Christian, because the only thing that can really anchor you, in my opinion, a religion. I would say that's specifically Christianity, which is why they don't care about people being Muslims or Hindus, but they do care about Christians. But that's for another day.
Well, and I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today for whatever the fuck this was. We called it Old Friends early on. Please subscribe to Bucklander's Twitter.
It's Synthesist,
because that's
Twitter.
the only place worth subscribing to on the internet anymore.
Synthesist has a Twitter. Fatty has Twitter.
Oh, does he?
Yes, but I basically like shit posts all the time.
Yeah, I'm somewhere in between. Again, what day it is? Am I shit posting or am I